The blizzard did not ask my permission before it swallowed me whole. It never does. That is what I have always admired about storms. They do not negotiate. They do not soften their edges for the sake of someone's comfort. They simply arrive, and the world must decide whether to break or to bend. I bent once, I will not do again. My boots found the snow before the iron veil gates had fully closed behind me, and for one single breath I stood still and let the cold hit my face like a clean, honest slap. The wind screamed through the pines on the ridge above the castle walls, beyond the tree lines, and somewhere deep in the frozen dark beyond the tree line. A wolf howled, not Caelan's, not yet, just the wild ones, the free ones, the ones who had never handed their throat to a king and called it love. He pulled my cloak tighter. Beneath it, pressed against my ribs where his hands used to rest without thinking, I carried the only thing I was taking with me that truly mattered. 2 months along, a secret folded inside my body, like a letter that had not yet been opened. I had crushed lavender between my palms before he left, the old trick, the one my mother taught me, to veil a pregnant omega scent, from even the sharpest alpha nose. The lavender coated my wrists, my throat, the hollow behind my ears. It would hold for 3 days. 3 days was enough. Behind me, on the war table in the East Tower, where Caelan spent every night bent over battle maps and pack alliances and every problem except the one sleeping in his own bed, I had left my silver mating ring. Not thrown, not broken, simply placed. Set down with the careful precision of a woman who has already done her mourning and arrived in grief. On the other side of it, at something quieter and more permanent than grief. The ring caught the low candlelight from the corridor when I set it down, and it gleamed once, sharp and cold and small, against the parchment of his war plans, next to the red wax seal of the iron veil pack. I did not look at it for long. I had one bag. I had lavender on my skin and pine resin in my hair, and a child beneath my heart who would never, if I had any say in the matter, learn what it felt like to be chosen second. The blizzard opened around me like a mouth, and I walked in. I want to stop here and ask you something, before we go any further into this story. If you are listening to this right now, if these words are finding you in your car, or in your bed, or in the dark of a room you needed to escape to, which country are you listening from? Drop it in the comments below, because this story belongs to all of us who have ever stood at a gate, in the cold, and chosen to keep walking. Let me tell you how we got here. He died on a Tuesday. That is the part that stays with me most. Not the pain, not the sound of the crowd, not even the cold of the marble seeping through my dress as he lay there. It is the sheer ordinariness of the day it happened on. Tuesday, a nothing day. A day for council reports and kitchen eatery and the minor administrative machinery of a castle running on routine. And on that particular Tuesday in my previous life, my body chose to betray me by going into early labor, 6 weeks ahead of time, and my mate chose to betray me by being too busy crowning another woman to notice. Let me take you back to that throne room, because you need a back to that throne room. In order to understand why the cold no longer frightens me. I had felt the first contraction at dawn, a deep, internal seizing, like the earth rearranging itself far below the surface. He pressed my hand flat against stomach and breathed the way the midwife had shown me, slow and low, and I told myself it was nothing, practice contractions. The body rehearsing. He dressed carefully because there was a formal ceremony that morning and I was still at that point. The Alpha King's bonded mate, which meant my absence, would be noticed and noted and whispered about in all the ways that things are whispered about in a castle, where half the court is waiting for you to fail, So he went to the throne room. He stood at the back, near the great stone pillars, stand at the head of his court, and he watched Caelan Duskmore stand at the head of his court, in his ceremonial brack and silver. Looking like everything power is supposed to look like, broad-shouldered and certain, his dark eyes moving through the room with the practiced calm of a man who has never once been made to feel small. And I watched him raise his hand to signal the herald. And I watched the herald call Marin Coldwell's name. Marin Coldwell, high-born, alpha-blooded, politically advantageous in 18 different directions that Caelan's war council had apparently been cataloging for months while I was busy growing his heir and trying not to faint from exhaustion. She walked up the center of the throne room in a cream gown with her copper hair loose down her back, and her chin at exactly the angle of a woman who has already been told she has won. And the court parted for her like water, and Caelan placed a crown on her head, and declared her his true queen. True queen. The second contraction hit me like a wall collapsing inward. He did not scream. I pressed my back against the stone pillar and gripped it with both hands and breathed through the white, hot, ripping sensation, while the court applauded and the Alpha King scent, his cedar, and clean winter scent that I had loved for 4 years of my life, drifted back to me from across the room carrying absolute nothing. No alarm, no recognition, no pull toward the woman in the back of the room who was actively bleeding through her Sarah May dress and trying to stay up to record of every promise he had ever made her. I made it to the corridor before my legs stopped working. I remember the marble coming up to meet me. I remember pressing my cheek against it and feeling the cold of it the way you feel cold when your body has already started the work of shutting down. From the outside in, methodical, without drama. I remember the particular silence of a corridor, just off a throne room full of celebration. I remember the sound of my own breathing, going shallow and strange. I remember placing my hand over my stomach one final time, and the way the small life inside me flickered. Once, twice, and then went still, and then I went still, and the cold marble held me, in the only embrace I was offered in that moment, and I died. 3 minutes. The moon goddess told me later, in the space between where I was and where I came back to. That 3 minutes is a long time if you know what to do with them. She has a way of speaking that is not speaking, a present that is not quite a presence. Like standing in a forest and becoming aware of the forest, becoming aware of you in return. She said, "You have not finished yet." She said, "I am sending you back." She said, "And this is the part that I will carry in my bones until I am ash and scattered pine. Go back and choose differently." He woke up on the night before the ceremony. My ring was on my finger. My body was whole. The pup, still there, still faint. Still barely a whisper of new, rain, and cedar mixed with something entirely its own, was still alive inside me. And Caelan Duskmore was asleep in the bed across the room, his great chest rising and falling with the slow, unbothered rhythm of a man who had not yet done the thing he was going to do, who did not know yet that I already knew, who had no idea that the woman lying beside him in the dark had already watched him break her open on cold marble and felt the exact weight of choosing his ambition over her life. I lay there for a long time, looking at the ceiling. He did not cry. I had already done that, in another life, on a cold floor, alone. He was not going to do it again. By the time the castle settled into its deepest pre-dawn quiet, I was already planning how to disappear. There is a kind of movement that grief teaches you, if you survive it. Not the frantic, visible grief that fills rooms and demands witnesses. The other kind. The kind that has already burned through all its fuel and arrived at something terribly efficient, on the other side. He moved through the Iron Vale Castle in the last hours before dawn with exactly that efficiency. No Hessen, no false starts. No standing in doorways looking at things I was leaving behind in the pine and feeling the pull of them. I felt nothing that resembled nostalgia. I had already mourned this place. The servants' passages run behind the main corridors of the Iron Vale, narrow stone, floored channels built centuries ago for the staff to move invisibly through the castle's business, without the sightlighters disturbing the sightlines of the nobility. I had mapped them in my first week as Caelan's mate, not because he was afraid of him then, but because I am the kind of woman who learns every exit in every room I enter, old habit, born from old wisdom. An omega who doesn't know her exit is an omega at someone else's mercy. He used them now to move from the east wing to the kitchens, from the kitchen to the cold stores, from the cold stores to the outer passage knew that ran along the base of the inner wall. He had one bag, small enough to carry it changing my silhouette, large enough to hold what mattered. A change of clothes, practical and dark. A pouch of the dried lavender I had taken from the still room shelf the night before. a small wrapped piece of salted bread, because I was 2 months pregnant, and I needed to eat something before walking into Blizzard, and I was nothing if not practical about keeping us both alive. A hunting knife, because the same. At the still room I paused, not for sentiment, but for lavender. I crushed it between my palms at the stone basin, the dry flowers releasing their purple gray dust and their sharp, clean, almost medicinal scent into the cold pre-dawn air. Then I pressed my palms to my throat, my wrists the inside of my elbows, and I held very still while the lavender settled over the deeper scent that lived beneath my skin now. The 2-month scent, the secret scent, the one that smelled like new rain and cedar, shadow, and something that had no name yet, because it had not been born yet. It held good. In the still room. It was in the still room, with my lavender-covered hands resting over the slight, not yet visible curve of my lower stomach, that the git itself known to me for the first time. I had heard of womb, memory in the way that people hear of things they are told exist, but have never needed to verify. As lore, as old pack history, as something whispered by elder omegas in the same breath as moon cycles and birth, tide, and the sacred mechanic of pack bloodlines, a rare omega ability, dormant until the 2nd trimester, activated, the elders said, by the developing pup's bond, thread beginning to reach outward from the womb, a new life trying to understand the world it was entering, sending out the faintest psychic filament to test what was safe and what was not. What the ability was in plain terms, truth recognition, not mind reading, nothing so clean as that. More like standing in a room and being able to feel the weight of a lie before it is spoken, a bloom of something rotten pressin' up from the floor, the way you can smell a storm before the sky shows you the clouds. Every false word spoken near me would register in my chest as wrongness. Every performance of remorse that was not remorse. Every declaration of convenience that was actually a declaration of convenience. Every carefully constructed half-truth armored in the language of sincerity. I would feel it. I would know. He did not know yet, standing in the still room, that this gift would matter as much as it was about to matter. He did not know that Caelan would find me, or how long it would take him, or how many different arrangements of the same insufficient words he would try to offer me as payment for a debt. That language that went so far beyond words, that language itself seemed inadequate to address it. All I knew, standing there with lavender on my hands and a child beneath my ribs, and a castle full of sleeping people, was that no idea I was leaving, was that something in me had shifted. Something had opened. The world had a texture it hadn't had before, not louder exactly name. More legible, like a fog lifting from a forest to reveal that every tree has a name. He finished preparing and walked to the outer gates. The night guard was Pell, young, earnest, the kind of boy who still believed the stories they tell about thy Alpha King being just and wise and chosen by fate. He was half asleep on his post, and started when he heard my footsteps on the frozen stone. My lady, I need air. I said it simply, and I let just enough of the Omega's natural calming frequency, a low, involuntary biological signal, warm as hearthlight, ease into my voice, a manipulation, not a manipulation. More like a hand pressed briefly over a candle flame. I won't be long. He believed me the way people believe things they want to be true. He opened the gate. He walked through it and did not look back. Caelan Duskmore found the ring at 6:47 in the morning. He would not know the precise time for years. It was his War Council secretary, the meticulous and fortunate Aldrich Pren, who later wrote the hour into the official record with the careful, horrified neutrality of a man document a natural disaster. 6:47, first light barely pressing through the east tower's high, narrow windows. The war maps still spread across the table from the night before, weighted at their corners with smooth river stones, showing the disputed border territories in the north where 3 rival packs had been pushing at the Iron Vale's boundary. The Iron Vale's boundaries all winter. He came in carrying a cup of black tea and the morning's intelligence reports, and he set them on the side table and ran his palm over the nearest map, tracing the contested ridgeline the way he always did first thing, his morning ritual, orienting him in the problems of his kingdom, before he had to speak to anyone about them. And then his hand stopped. Because his nose had already found it. The room smelled wrong. For 4 years, the East Tower had carried the ghost of Celine's scent as a baseline note beneath everything. Beneath everything else, beneath the beeswax candles, and the old parchment and the iron, cold of winter coming through the stone. She didn't spend much time in the war room, but she passed through it often enough, stood at the window, brought him tea often enough, stood at the window, looking at the ridge often enough, that her scent had settled in the room the way scent settles into place when it belongs there. Pine and clean water, and something warmer underneath, something that his wolf regnied before his mind did every single time, something that meant home in a language older than speech. That morning, the room smelled of lavender. Sharp, clean, deliberate lavender, the kind of lavender someone uses to veil something. The kind that an omega would crush and press to her skin if she needed to move through space, and leave to move through a space and leave nothing of hers behind. The cold started in his sternum and worked outward. He turned. His eyes went to the war table, and for 1 second he did not see it. Or rather, his mind did not allow him to process what his eyes were reporting. The way a mind will sometimes protect self with a half-second of buffer and the understand between the input and the understanding. Then the buffer failed. The silver ring, simple. The clean, unadorned band he had slid onto her finger on their bonding night, when he had believed, or performed believing. He was not certain now which had been, that she was the axis around which everything else would turn. On his maps, left the precise, unhurried placement of a woman who had not thrown it in anger, which would have been easier to receive, but had simply set it down, carefully, the way you set down something you are finished with. No, the word came out of him before he understood he was speaking. He crossed to the table in 2 strides and picked up the ring, and the moment his skin closed around it the bond. The mate bond. The psychic. Biologic thread that had lived in his chest for Foro and Constant and Terry for granted. Low and constant and taken Terry for granted. Wrenched. Not snapped. Not yet. It was pulling. Stretching thin, the way a root tears when the earth beneath it shifts. Celine, he said her name to the empty room. Nothing answered, not even the echo of her that usually lived in the walls. He moved, out of the East Tower into the corridor, and his wolf was already up and pressing against the inside of his ribs. Panics, the hempshire, scenting the air in short, hard pulls, trying to find her. Down the main corridor, past the great hall, where the kitchen were beginning their morning noise. His feet found the servants' passage without him consciously choosing it, his wolf's instinct tracking. The last ghost trail of lavender and pine through the castle's back channels, toward the outer wall, toward the gate. The night guard, Pell, 18 years old and going pale in the early light, till on post when Caelan emerged from the outer passage. He didn't need to ask. He could see from the boy's face that Celine had come this way. He could see the exact moment when the boy realized he had opened the gate for the Alpha King's mate, and was now watching the Alpha King himps arrive, alone, at dawn, in a hallway that still smelled faintly of lavender. She asked for air. Pell started. The rest of whatever he was going to say died in the look on Caelan's face. Caelan stepped past him and through the outer gate in the winter morning, and he stood there in the snow. And the snow where her footprints were already being erased by last night's wind. Blown drifts. And he pressed the silver ring against his sternum with his closed fist. And he did the one thing that Celine had done in a cold corridor 1 year in the future that he could not remember, would not and would never know about. He breathed. And the bond snapped. The sound of it, and there was a sound, a shattering high frequency that lived in the bones rather than the ears, went through his tire-empt body like a blade. He was on his knees in the snow before the impact even fully registered. One hand braced against the frozen ground, one hand still pressed to his chest where the bond had lived. His lungs working in short, useless, drowning pulls at air that no longer smelled of her. Behind him, through the great hall's open corridors, he could hear his war council beginning to assemble. He could not stand up. He tried and his legs refused him, and the Alpha King of the Iron Veil Pack, the most powerful shifter in 5 territories. The man who had never bent his knee to any threat, any enemy, any force in the known world, knelt in the snow outside his own gate, clutching his chest, tears cutting cold tracks down his face, while his counsel filtered into the great hall and fell into silence so appalled and sown weight that it seemed to have its own weight. Aldrich Pren, the secretary, wrote the time in his ledger. 6:47. He came after me on the 2nd day. He had known he would, not because of arrogance. I have never been arrogant about the things I know, but because the mate bond, even severed, leaves a phantom, a ghost channel, like a river that dried but left its shape pressed to the earth. I could feel the absence of it in my chest as a very specific kind of pressure, the way you feel a tooth that has been pulled not by the tooth presence, but by the hollowness of presence, but by the hollowness of where it was. And in that hollowness for 2 days, I could feel the faint, trailing vibration of something massive searching. He was not built to wait. He never was. I had made it 30 miles north of the Iron Veil by the time the blizzard eased enough to let the pine forest, following the old cast trail, the one that the border traders use in autumn, that none of Caelan's patrol routes close, that none of Caelan's patrol routes covered because it crossed into neutral territory after the first ridge, and his wolves had standing orders not to pursue into neutral ground. Standing orders he had written hymns, standing orders he had written else, with the particular arrogance of a man who believes his own rules will always apply to everyone else. Standing orders, I suspected, that he would break without a second thought when it came to this. He walked steadily. I ate when I needed to eat. I slept in short intervals against the sheltered leeward sides of large pines, where the snow didn't reach, and the cold was merely cold rather than killing cold. I drank from streams when I found them flowing beneath their iced over surfaces. Pressed the ice until it cracked in manageable pieces, and kneeling to cup the water below. He talked to the pup, quietly, the way one talks to someone who can't yet respond, but whom you are certain is listening. We're doing well, I told him, or her. I didn't know yet. This cold is temporary, everything cold is temporary if you move through it. My womb memory was sharpening as the days passed. Not loudly, not with dramatic visions, but with a growing clarity in my peripheral awareness, as if the world were slowing into better focus at its edges. Edges. I could feel the pack bonds threading through the landscape like buried roots. Here, a territorial edge, where 3 Ashfen scouts had recently passed. Their loyalty, scent still warm in the frozen bark. There, a camping spot used by a family of traveling packless wolves. Their anxiety, a Dramzayan hope worn into the ground, like a pup. The pup was reaching out into the world and reporting back, and what it reported was legible to me in a way not had been before, in a way nothing had been before. On the morning of the 2nd day, I felt something else. Something enormous and unstable, coming from the south. Not close yet, but wrong. The way a tree is wrong when its root system has been compromised, still standing, still appearing solid, but radiating something structurally incorrect to any sensitor read it, to anything sensate enough to read it. A wrongness in the pattern of a once powerful pack bond, now frayed at its center and straining under the load. Him. His wolf. Moving north through the territories at a speed that would be impressive if it weren't also clearly desperate. Not the fluid, ground, eating lope of a healthy alpha wolf in his prime, but something faster and more jagged, burning the bodies through reserves, driving past the body's reasonable objection. Rejection sickness does this. I had read about it. The severing of a mate bond bonding creates a physiologic cascade in the dominant partner. Fever, chest pain, compromised shifting, periods of disorientation. The body responds as if to a profound systemic injury, because that is, in biological terms, exactly what it is. I felt a small involuntary flicker of something in my chest that I could not quite name. Not pity, exactly. I am too honest with myself to dress pity as something more elegant than it is. It might have been pity. It might have been the echo of what I had once felt for him. A love so embedded in my cells that it had not fully understood yet, that I was no longer living from it. Whatever it was, he acknowledged it the way one acknowledges the existence of a weathercaster that is not currently a problem and walks faster. He reached the Ashfen pack's outer boundary marker, a carved stone pillar bearing the Ashfen wolf sigil, flanked by 2 live pine trees twisted together at the base by axes of shared growth. On the afternoon of the second day, I stopped out of the marker and stood still, keeping my hands visible at my sides, because showing up, unannounced at a neutral pack's border, is a matter of protocol, even when you are moving as fast as I was. The Ashfen scout found me in under 3 minutes. A woman, tall, with the broad shoulders of someone who shifts large and the careful hostile eyes of a pack that has learned to read strangers accurately, because it can afford to be wrong. She looked at me for a long moment. She looked at the satchel. She looked at the satchel. She looked at the careful way I was standing. "Your iron veil," she said, not a question. I was. She studied me for another moment, and something in my bearing or my scent or the precise quality of my stillness must have communicated what word have been inadequate to. "Tune in." "No one." She nodded once, the short, definitive nod of a decision made, and turned toward the tree line. "Come then." He followed her into the pines. Behind me, somewhere on the south ridge, some massive and suffering and unable to stop was still coming. I could feel it the way you feel a storm. I kept walking. He found me on the 4th morning. He was sitting on a low stone bench in the Ashfen pack's inner courtyard, a spare, function space enclosed by timber walls, with a fire burning in the central pit, and the kind of purposeful quiet around it that belongs to a pack that values practical peace over ceremonial grandeur. I had a bowl of warm broth in my hands, because he was cold and pregnant, and the Ashfen's cook, a compact elder woman named Bretta, had delivered it to my room that morning with the matter of kindness of someone who has spent decades keeping bodies alive and considered it simply the primary work of the world. He was drinking the broth when the courtyard gate opened. I did not need to look up to know who had come through it. The womb. Memory registered him before my eyes did. A vast, turbulent presence rolling toward me like a weather front. His scent preceding him through the gate by several seconds. Cedar and winter cold and something underneath both of those. Something scorched and desperate, burnt at the edges, like a forest that has been standing in smoke for days. Not calm cedar, not the warm, deep cedar that had once meant safety to me. In a part of my I no longer consulted. This was cedar on fire, cedar choking. He raised my eyes from the broth. He looked like he had been through something close to war. 4 days of rejection sickness, and relentless movement through a blizzard had stripped something from Caelan Duskmore that could not be easily rebuilt. Not his physical size, which was still enormous, not his bearing exactly, but the particular quality of effort's authority that had always surrounded him like a second skin that was gone. What remained was something rawer and more honest, and somehow more disturbing for it. A man whose certainties had been taken from him faster than he had had time to construct replacements. His jaw was wet with melted snow. His jaw carried 4 days of growth. Coat, his slept through at the shoulders, and he had not slept. That much was visible in his eyes from across. The courtyard, the redness there, the over-focusing, the way they found me, and then simply stopped moving. He stood in the gate. I looked at him with the same expression I might offer a traveling merchant I had met once and did not know particularly well. Polite, attentive, distant. Around the courtyard, the Ashfen wolves, who had been going about their mourning, had gone still in the particular, instinctive way that pack wolves go still when an alpha enters their space. Not afraid, not entirely, but aware. Calibrating. Several of them looked to me, which surprised me faintly. Already, in 4 days, I had apparently become something to them, a reference point. Caelan stepped forward in the courtyard. Celine, his voice was wrecked, hollowed out from somewhere deep in the chest, has said my name the way people call out in dark find, when they are not certain what they will find. Caelan. I kept my voice level, warm even, the way one is warm to a known acquaintance. Not cold enough to be rude, not close enough to be intimate. I wrapped both hands around the broth bowl. You look unwell. The Ashfen's healer is Mira. She's in the east building. You should see her but rejection sickness. He stopped walking. Something moved across his face, a kind of stunned, flinching disorientation, as if he had crossed 30 miles of frozen wilderness with a very specific expectation of what he would find on the other side of it, and what he had found was not it, and what he had found was not it. "You're not," he started again. "Celine, you left." "I know," I nodded, still level, still warm, still entirely unreadable. "I was there." "Your ring was returned, yes." He stood in the middle of the courtyard with the snow from his coat melting in small dark circles on the stone beneath him. And his hands, I noticed, were slightly open at his sides in the posture of someone who had prepared for resistance and found none.
Welcome back to the Whispers of Alpha King channel. Today we're going to present a new story that I believe you'll be very curious about and interested in because of its incredibly captivating content. Now let's explore it together until the end of the video. This is a fictional story compiled from various sources, supported by AI, and the content is purely for entertainment and educational purposes.
And found me, and did not know what to do with that. His wolf's energy was present at every surface. I could feel it across the courtyard, frantic and enormous and poorly leashed, pressing for the dominant response, for the claim, for any lever that would restore the thing that had been severed. I felt the womb memory bloom in my chest like ink dropped in still water. Every word he was about to say, I could feel before it arrived, its texture, its truth content, the ratio of genuine anguish to unconscious performance, and what I felt was complicated. His pain was real. I will not pretend otherwise. The pain of a man who has arrived at the not nothing, and I am what he has destroyed, is not nothing, and I am not built to be unmoved by genuine suffering. But beneath the pain threaded through it like a dark vein through pale stone, was something else. The assumption, the old bone, deep, unexamined assumption of a man, has always been chosen by everything around him, that of course, if he came here, if he showed up, if he looked at her like this, she would soften. She would soften. I took a sip of broth. "Please rest," I said. "The Ashfen will offer you a room. We can speak later, if you'd like." He stood up, tucked the bowl against my side, and walked back toward the east building with the unhurried steps of a woman, and nothing particular to be, and nothing particular to, and nothing particular to fear. Behind me, the courtyard was completely silent. He knocked on my door that evening. I had expected it. I had also been expecting it in the particular way one expects a thing they have braced against. Not with dread, not with longing, but with a kind of practical readiness, the same way you brace before a door you know is going to stick. I opened it. He had changed into dry clothes, borrowed from somewhere. A plain gray tunic too short in the arms, dark trousers that sat wrong at the hip on his frame. He had washed his face. He had not slept. The evidence of the rejection sickness was more visible now, in the candlelight of the corridor, than it had been in the wide gray light of the courtyard. A faint, irregular tremor in his right hand, which he pressed flat against the doorframe when he noticed that I had noticed it, when he notes that I'd know it. A tightness across his chest that changed the rhythm of his breathing. I could hear it, shallow and slight labored, the body working harder than it should to perform the basic business of oxygenation when its mate bond had been severed, and its deep biology was registering the loss, catastrophing the loss as catastrophic injury. He looked at me for a long moment without speaking. I waited. The womb, memory was already active, already reading the air between us, not with effort, not with concentration, but the way eyes adjust to a darker room, passively, inevitably. "I don't know how to start," he said at last. "Then don't start. You don't have to." "Celine. I mean that genuinely. You are injured. The Ashfen healer made up a tonic for the bond, sickness this afternoon. Mira left it outside your door. I asked her too. You should drink it before sleep." He stared at me. There was something in his eyes that was very close to anger, but not quite. It was more confused than anger, with the same heat but without the direction. Anger needs a target. What he was feeling did not know where to go. "You're telling me to go to sleep." He said it flat. "I'm telling you to take care of yourself." I kept the warmth in my voice, his enemy. Genuine warmth, because despite everything I was not his enemy. I simply was not his. You drove yours through a blizzard in rejection sickness, Caelan. You could have died. The pup and I are safe. We are warm. We have food. You have done what you came to do. You found us. Now rest. The pup. He watched the word land in him like something thrown hard against glass. Not breaking it yet, but spreading a fracture pattern from the point of impact. Small, bright lines running through the surface. His voice dropped. The tremor in his hand moved to his jaw. You're carrying. Yes. How long? 2 months. He pressed his free hand over his mouth. The motion was not controlled. It was the involuntary gesture of a man trying to hold something inside him that is threatened to come out sideways. Not cleanly, not in any form that would be acceptable to the image of him he has maintained for 30-something years of living. His scent crested, the burnt cedar, the scorched ash, and panic underneath, and then I felt the bloom in my chest rising like nausea, and what the womb memory showed me in that moment was his guilt. Raw, unprocessed guilt, not performance, not the strategic remorse of a man calculating how much contrition will purchase what outcome. Real guilt, the kind with no plan attached to it, the kind that simply sits in the body and corrodes. Underneath, love, old love, the tangled, badly tended, neglected love of a man who has always us that thinks he's trusted the things he loves will remain available to him regardless of how rarely he tends to them, and is learning for the first time in visceral, bone, deep rejection, sickness terms that this is not how love works. I felt it all, clear as text. He also felt the absence of the question I needed, in all of it, the guilt, the fear, the love, the desperate animal grief of his wolf. There was still no arrival at the question that mattered. No reaching toward why did she leave, not what did I do, not what did it cost her, only how do I get her back. Not the same thing. Not remotely the same thing. I should have told you, he started, about Marin, the council's arrangement. I know about Marin. He stopped. I know about the ceremony they planned. I know about the crown. I know about the throne room. I kept my voice in Caelan. I know everything Caelan. I knew before he left. I knew before he left. The silence that followed this was a different quality of silence than the ones before it. Not the silence of a person, absorbing new information, but the silence of a person whose entire strategic map of condition has just been invalidated. He had come here with a version of events he intended to explain. He had come here to offer revealed. He had not prepared for a woman who had nothing left to revealed. How, he said. I did not answer that question. I stepped back from the doorway. The tonic is by your door, I said. Sleep, Caelan. I mean that as genuine advice. You will not find what you're looking for tonight. He closed the door. On my side of it, I stood for a moment in the dark room, my hand pressed flat against the wood, and I breathed in the lingering scorched cedar scent of him still hanging in the core air. Then I turned away and got into bed. He left firewood outside my door. I found it in the morning, a full cord split with the specific, labor-intensive precision of someone who had spent a significant portion of the night doing a physical task that did not require their skill level and had done it anyway. The Ashfen pack had a wood store. The Ashfen pack had young wolves whose assigned task it was to keep their guests' rooms supplied. Caelan knew this and had done it himself regardless, because the only tool he had for this moment was his body. And when a man does not know how to say a thing, he will find the nearest physical process for saying it and exhaust him against it until someone notices. He noticed. I brought one log inside and set it on the hearth and lit the fire myself. At breakfast in the Ashfen Great Hall, he was there before me, sitting at the end of one of the long communal tables with an untouched plate of food and the rigid, alert stillness of someone who has chosen their position strategically and is pretending they haven't. He watched me walk in. I could feel the watching the way you feel sunlight on the back of your neck when you are facing away from the window. Directional, specific, warm, in a way that carries intention. He took a seat 3 places down from Mira the healer and talked to her about the kind of local mountain root she had used in the Bond sickness tonic, which turned out to be genuinely interesting and about which she had a great deal to say. I ate my breakfast. I drank my tea. I did not look in his direction. He left before he finished. An hour later, I was in the Ashfen small library, a real library, to my pleasant surprise. 3 walls of tightly packed shelves, in a low-ceilinged timber room that smelled of old, paper and pine sap and the particular dusty warmth of books that are actually used. Working through a text on Omega lore that the librarian had offered me without my asking for it, Caelan appeared in the doorway. He did not come inside. He stood in the frame. He stood in the frame, which was too small for him in the way that most things were too small for him, and looked at me among the books, and then looked at the small hearth in the library's far corner, which was cold. He's appeared. 15 minutes later, a fire was burning in the library hearth. He had not spoken to me while he built and lit it. He had moved around the periphery of the room with the focused, careful movements of Sankey, someone trying not to disturb anything, which in his case involved an almost comical degree of spatial awareness, given his size relative to the shelves. He had lit the fire and left, and the room was warmer, and I kept reading. This was how it began. The firewood at dawn, the fire in the library. 2 hours later, he was standing in the snow outside the Ashfen's inner gate with no coat on. He had given it to a packless child, who'd arrived at the border. I learned later from Breda, the cook, who'd seen it happen, and reported it with the reverent tone and the elaborate toe, witnessing something they want the record to. Reflect standing in the snow and the cold without the coat, and not going inside, not coming to find me, just standing there, present, suffering, publicly. His scent reached me through the narrow window of my room, burnt cedar, but underneath it, and not something else beginning. Something I had not expected and did not entirely know what to do with. Not warmth, not yet, more like the memory of warmth. Like running your hand over the stone of a hearth that has been cold for days, finding, very faint and very deep in the rock, residual heat from weeks before, something that had not yet died. He sat with the book in my lap and did not look out the window. In the evening, there was a knock at my door. Not his knock, the sharp, confident double tap he'd used the night before, but something brought by an Ashfen child, 8 years old, carrying a small clay pot of what turned out to be warmed blend, the bar, cream and mountain herb, the pregnancy for port blend that Mira apparently made for expectant pack mothers. The child said it was from the healer. The child's face said, with the transparent honesty of 8-year-olds everywhere, that the healer had been asked to prepare it by some spirit, by someone specific. The broth was very good. I ate it at the window with the shutters open slightly, letting the cold air in, looking out in the sand pit was burning low, where the fire in the central pit was burning low and steady and casting long orange light across the snow, and I thought about the firewood and the library hearth, and the coat and the broth, and the 6 hours he had spent in the snow during the day without anyone asking to. He thought about the womb, memory, and what it had shown me last night in the doorway, the guilt that was real, the love that was real, even if real was not the same as sufficient. He closed the shutters. He thanked no one. On the 5th day, his wolf came out. Not the man, the wolf, the distinction matters. The man I could manage, had been managing, with the steady, resource-sufficient calm of someone who has drawn a line in still, frozen ground and intends to maintain it. The man brought firewood and stood in the cold and made careful, peripheral appearances in rooms I occupied without making direct demands of me. And it was legible. I could read it. He could process the subtext of it without being ambushed. The wolf was something else entirely. He came out of the Ashfen library in the main corridor at midday, and found him standing against the opposite wall. And what I felt crossing the space between us was not Caelan's usual contained, carefully managed alpha energy. It was raw, open. Every latch unhooked, every composed surface dissolved back in something that had not learned how to perform concept, because it had evolved before the concept of composure existed. His eyes were not fully human. They were the pale, fractured gold a wolf half-surfaced. The pupil slightly wrong in the artificial light, the blink rate slow than a man's. He was not threatening me. He was looking at me the way his wolf had probably looked at me every day for 4 years, when the man had been too dignified to let it show. With a direct, unmediated, animal intensity of acknowledgement that said, "You are mine and I am yours, and the space between us is wrong, and every instinct I possess is screaming at me to close it, and I am not closing it, 'cause you have told me not to, and I am trying, when what I am underneath everything I have built is I am lot his mate, is not a king, but a wolf who has lost his mate." I looked at him. He walked past him. Not quickly, not with avoidance. Simply with the unhurrying, going in the direct step of a woman who has known the presence of something in around had present in her path and chosen to move around it without altering her pace. In the great hall that afternoon, it happened. The Ashfen's Alpha, a quiet, broad-faced man named Ashfen, who had accepted my presence with the measured generosity of a pack leader who understands that neutrality has value and warmth costs nothing, had gathered his senior wolves for the daily pack briefing. Caelan was present at the table because Ashfen had invited him. Pack protocol, courtesy between alphas, the complicated mutual respect of two dominant males sharing territory without conflict. He was present because Myra had asked me to attend for a conversation that was happened pre-nail care, that was happened before the briefing. Mira's conversation finished, the briefing began, I rose to leave. Caelan stood up from his chair. Not threateningly, not in the commanding room, claiming way that alphas stand when they wish to assert something. He stood up and then, in full view of every Ashfen wolf present, he stepped away from the table, on the stone floor, and he went down onto one knee on the stone floor, and then the other knee, and then the other knee, and touched his forehead to the cold stone of the Ashfen Great Hall floor. The room went airless. This is what full submission looks like in wolf culture. Forehead to ground, throat exposed, body entirely open. An alpha doing this does not happen. An alpha king doing this before a room of another pack's wolves, before witness who will carry thee. Story of it back through every pack in 5 territories, is something for which there is no precedent. It costs everything the architecture of alpha identity is built upon. He pressed his forehead to that cold floor, and he kept it there. I stopped walking. He stood in the aisle between the tables, and I felt the womb, memory bloom so powerfully that my vision actually sharpened. Not blurred. Sharpened, every edge in the room going clean and precise, the way the world looks after a fever breaks. I felt what was coming off him in waves, shame that had finally arrived at honesty, a grief so total it had no target left to direct itself toward, and underneath both of those, holding them up the way bedrock holds everything above it, the particular anguish of a man who is only now understanding, with his face against stone and a room full of witnesses, that he has never in his life done anything, as in what he destroy, important as what he destroyed. The Ashfen wolves were utterly silent. Ashfen was looking at his table. He looked at Caelan for a count of 10. Then I said quietly to the room at large, "Please proceed with the briefing," and I walked out. In the corridor, I stood against the outer wall, my back to the cold stone, and I pressed both hands flat against the swell of my stomach stone where the pup was, and I breathed through the feeling that was moving through my chest, which was not softening, which was not surrender, but which was something more comfortable and more uncomfortable than either of those things. I stayed there until the feeling passed. Then I went to my room. He started coming to the evening fire. The Ashfen pack gathered each night in the main hall around the long hearth that ran nearly the full length of the eastern wall. Not with ritual or formality, but with the easy, habitual warmth of wolves who genuinely like each other, who gather not because the pack structure requires it, but because fire is there and the cold is outside and there is food and conversation, and the specific wordless comfort of being in the same space as the pack you belong to. Bretta kept the food coming from the side kitchen in a continuous, unplanned supply of bread and stew and root, honey pastries. The old wolves told stories. The young ones argued about hunting technique, and fell asleep in the chairs closest to the hearth. I had started attending on the 3rd night. He came because he was cold, and because the food was good, and because the Ashfen's uncomplicated warmth was something I find To my mild surprise, genuinely restorative. He sat in a chair on the nearer end of the hearth, close to Bretta and the older women. And he accepted bread when it was offered and listened to the stories when they were good ones. And felt the Ashfen's pack bonds moving around me in the warm air like slow, deep currents in a lake. Safe, unhurried, genuinely benevolent. Caelan came on the 5th night. He took a chair at the far end of the hearth, not close to me, not conspicuously distant, but calibrated, as not technically in the same room as May, and was obviously carefully, not imposing on the space I had claimed. He sat, and he accepted the cup of tea that Bretta pressed into his hands with the brusque generosity. She pressed things into everyone's hands, and he was quiet. He did not try to enter the conversation. He did not try to catch my eye. For 3 nights, this was the pattern. On the 8th night, it was cold, genuinely cold, the kind that found the places the fire couldn't reach and settled there, the stone floor, the wooden frames of the high windows, the far corners of the hall where the heat dissipated before it arrived. I had my cloak pulled around me, and my feet tucked under me in the chair. And I was, I will admit, in the specific sum with the cold in the specific way that pregnant women struggle with cold when their circulation is being directed in complicated biological direction by a small person, diurnal warmth, who is currently claiming the lion's share of available warmth. My hands in particular were cold. He was blowing on them, a graceless, entirely undignified thing to do, pressing my fingers against my mouth and breathing the hot air of my own lungs over them. When I became aware that Caelan had moved, not closed the full distance, not presumed. He had shifted his chair 6 inches, maybe 8, and extended his hand, open, flat, palm up, placed on the arm of my chair's edge without touching my chair itself. Not a gesture of claim, not even quite an offer. Something more tented than either, more like a man putting something valuable on a table and stepping back. Here, if you want it. He looked at his hand. He was not looking at my face. He was looking at the fire, with the studied neutrality of someone who has constructed a careful system of not. Look in order to avoid making this moment into a pressure. His jaw was set, the tremor in his right hand. Still there, still the rejection sickness working through him. Still something I found I could not be entirely indifferent to, no matter how much I wished to be. Was visible, if you were looking. I was looking. He did not say anything. He did not move. After a moment, I unfolded my hands from in front of my mouth and placed them flat in my lap and looked back at the fire. He kept his hand where it was for a long time. Then he drew it back and slowly, the same care which had been extended, and settled it in his own lap, and he didn't own lap. And he did not try again. He did not look at me. He did not leave. He sat at the far end of the hearth with untouched cup of tea and his invisible suffering, an open, ruined, patient wolfen grief. And he stayed until the fire burned low, and the hall began to empty. Then he rose and inclined his head to Bretta and walked toward the corridor to his borrowed room. At the door he stopped. Without turning, in a voice low enough that it barely crossed that it did, but clear enough that it said, "Your hands were cold." Nothing else. He didn't apologize for the cold. He didn't connect it to him's. He didn't use it as a bridge to anything larger. He simply named the thing he had noticed, and walked out, and the door closed behind him, and the light closed behind him, and the last of the fire popped and settled into embers, and the hall was quiet. He sat for another several minutes, in the near dark alone. My hands were still cold. The ice came overnight. The Ashfen's courtyard, which had been packed snow for a week, became a single sheet of clear still as by morning when a false thaw night froze. Turns over after midnight, and left everything coated in the glassine Prexin perfection of a surface that is absolutely certain to betray anyone who trusts it. Bretta declared breakfast would be brought to the rooms, rather than expecting people to cross the courtyard at their own mortal peril. The Ashfen wolves, sensible and local, this terrain and accustomed to this terrain, wore their cleated boots with the weary expertise of people who have been outsmarted by ice before and chosen to stop taking it personally. I did not own cleated boots. I had walked out of the Iron Vale in the boots I had, which were good boots, well made, well fitted, but not built for a frozen courtyard on a false, thaw morning. I should have stayed inside. He did not, because I had been inside for 3 days with the exception of Suvride's courtyard time, and I was tired of walls time. I was tired of walls. And the morning was clear and bright in the way that only deeply frozen mornings are clear and bright. The sky a specific shade of pale winter blue that has no haze in it and no compromise. And the light hitting the ice-covered pines at the far end of the courtyard was making something happen with the shadows and the refracted light that I found unexpected beautiful and want to be near. And want it to be near. He was half across the courtyard when I hit the bad patch. The ice here was slightly inclined, an almost imperceptible tilt toward the drainage channel along the courtyard's eastern edge, and the thin morning sunlight had not yet reached it, and my right boot went out from under me in the particular, treacherous, instantaneous way that ice moves when it moves, with no intermediate phase between traction and none. The arm that caught mine came from the left. He had been crossing the courtyard from the storeroom. I had not seen him, or had not processed seeing him, which is not the same thing, but produces the same result. And his hand closed around my upper arm before he had fully registered I was falling, and the grip was precise and firm and immediately, correctly calibrated. Mr. King to stabilize rather than pull. He did not yank me upright. He simply caught me and steadied me, his feet planted in the cleated boots he had from an Ashfen cleated boots he had borrowed from an Ashfen wolf 2 days ago, and the fall resolved into nothing more than a stumble. He was upright, he was beside me. For one moment I was close enough to feel the heat of him through my cloak, close enough that his scent was not a general presence in the air, but a specific, immediate thing. Cedar. Warm cedar, full cedar, the deep, undamaged cedar of him before the desperation and sickness had burned its edges. Clean winter, something that smelled like before. I heard the way his breath changed. I felt through the womb memory, the tidal wave of hope that hit him in that moment. Enormous, disorienting, almost incapacitating in its size. The hope of a man who has been starving, and has just been handed something that might be food, and can't bear look directly at it in case it disappears. His grip on my arm had gone from steadying to some, and not quite able holding, and not quite able to release. Celine, he breathed, and the way he said it was not the word, it was everything he had not said for 8 days, compressed into 2 syllables, the prayer and the plea, and the terrible naked hope of it. I looked up at his face. The hope there was blinding. I let it exist for 3 full seconds. Then he removed his hand from my arm. With both of mine, carefully, precisely, the way you remove something fragile from a surface where it does not belong. Not in anger, not in cruelty, simply in the clear-eyed recognition that the thing cannot stay where it is. 1 step back. Enough. And I looked at him. He was still holding that hope on his face, unable to extinguish it fast enough. The 3 seconds of proximity in cedar, and the breath of before still burning through his expression like light through a shutter he could not close in time. His eyes searched mine, and what they found there made the hope begin to dim at the edges. Slowly, the way dusk comes on a clear day, not all at once, but incremental, undeniable steps. He let him see me clearly. Not my anger. I had moved past anger the way you move past a landscape. Not forget it, but no longer standing in it. Not my grief. What I let him see was the other thing. The thing that was harder for him to face than either of those. Because anger and grief implied that he still had the power to affect me significantly. And this was something else. This was the face of a woman who had walked through a gate, in a blizzard, carrying the only things that mattered and had discovered, on the other side of that gate. Sequer. That she was sufficient. That the cold had not killed her. That the warmth she had been borrowing from him had been hers all along. And she had simply forgotten, and now she remembered. He said, "Your hair will never know the warmth of your cedar." I said it the way you say something that is simply and permanently true. Not with heat. Not with the theatrical weight of a declaration, evenly, the way you name the temperature of water. He will only know the cold you left us in. The hope went out. Not gradually, not in the slow dimming way it had been going. All at once, like a lamp when the oil runs out. The light there, and then absolute not there in the room discovering the shape of its own darkness. The expression that replaced it was not something I have a clean word for. It was the face of a man for whom a specific final understanding has arrived, and the understanding has confirmed what some buried part of him already knew, and the confirmation hurts in the way that only certainties hurt, because uncertainties can still be argued with. Neemturi, Inanas. His knees hit the ice. Not the symbolic, chosen submission of the great hall, that had been a decision made with the part of him still capable of strategic action. This was structural failure. The way a building goes down when the load, very element gives out, completely, without transition, without the middle step. One moment he was standing, and the next moment he was not, and his large hands were pressing flat against the ice on either side of his knees, and that came of him was not words, and the sound that came out of him was not words. He stood in the frozen courtyard and watched him, and I did not go to him, and I did not look away, as having aught to see. Is not the same as having boundaries about it. He was still there, when I turned toward the east building's door. I pulled it open. The warmth of the interior met me, fire and pine and bread, and the ordinary, uncomplicated warmth of a place where I was safe. I stepped inside. The door closed. Outside, in the silence of the ice, the Alpha King of the Iron Veil remained on his knees in the cold, and the morning continued without him, and the morning continued without him. The threat arrived on the 11th night, and I felt it before it had a name. He was lying in bed in the dark of the Ashfen guest room, listening to the silence that precedes deep sleep. The settling of the timber walls, the very distant conversation of wind in the upper pines, the faint and regular sound of the Ashfen night patrol, moving in their rotation around the outer perimeter. The pup was quiet. They had been quiet the last 2 days, and Mira had told me this was normal, a kind of internal reorganization, the biological business of the second trimester finding its new arrangement. But it still made me want to my hands on my stomach. Hey, sir, hold very still and listen. He was listening when the womb memory opened. Not gradually, not in the way it usually opened, the way a window opens, incremental, admit the air by degrees. It opened all at once, like a door blown in by wind, that turns out to have been carrying storm behind it all along. And what came through was not one feeling or two, but a cascade. A pack's sudden collective alarm. Fear that had the specific texture of a threat that has been anticipated, and is now arriving in earlier than expected. The Ashfen Border Scouts. I had learned their psychic signature in the days here. The 4 young wolves who ran the northern and eastern perimeter were afraid, not of a storm, not of a packless predator, of wolves. He was out of bed before he fully understood what I was doing, and dressed before he finished understanding why, and in the corridor, the first distant howl reached the physical world. But I had heard it in the womb, memory first. The Ashfen Great Hall was lit and assembling with the practice of a pack, with the practiced speed a pack that has run emergency protocols before. Sin Ashfen was already at the central table when I arrived, and the expression on his face controlled, but with the particular controlled quality of a man managing a situation that is worse than he is current willing to say, confirmed what the womb, memory had shown me. Border breach, he said when he saw me, the spare neutral tone of a man giving information to someone he has decided to treat as an adult. Eastern Ridge, Vorkeld wolves, 3 dozen, minimum. Vorkeld. The name landed in my chest with specific weight. Aldrich Vorkeld's pack. Aldrich Vorkeld's pack. The Alpha who had been testing the Iron Veil's northerns all winter on Caelan's maps. The pack strong enough to be a significant rival in a normal season and formidable in the context of a season where the Iron Veil's Alpha King Caelan had driven him half to ruin in rejection sickness, chasing an Omega across 3 territory, and was in current kneeling on frozen courtyard's end of command team meter as per his war council. The Vorkeld wolves had not come here accidentally. They had come because the Iron Veil was vulnerable, and the thing that had made it vulnerable was present in this building, and attacking the Ashfen pack to take or harm, that thing was a calculation of someone who understood leverage. Someone who had scouts watching Caelan's deterioration. Someone who had decided that this specific blizzard, in this specific season, with the Alpha King compromised and the mate bond severed and the heir unborn and unprotected, the heir unborn and protected, was the moment to move. The womb, memory was showing me all of it in overlapping layers. The Ashfen scouts' fear, the Vorkald wolves' collective aggressive intent, radiating through their pack bond like heat from a forge, and beneath both of those, the Ashfen pack's own bond, taut, frightened, but holding. Holding because Eason was holding it. Holding because the Ashfen wolves were loyal and well-trained and not without courage, when he, not courage. Caelan came through the door from the east corridor. He had shifted partway and then pulled him back. The evidence was in his eyes, still gold, in the tension across his shoulders that had the slightly wrong geometry of a man who has been half animal in the last 30 seconds. His gaze found his face, then found me, and something moved across his face that I read without effort. Relief that I was present and upright, then the instantaneous tactical shift of a dominant alpha, orienting to a threat. How many and from which direction? He said it to Eason without preamble. Essen told him. Caelan turned back to me, and his expression in that moment was not the desperate, starved look of the last 11 days. It was something cleaner, more honest. The look of a man who has a job to do, and knows how to do it and is, for a single suspended moment, and making the person who matter most, and making a decision about what that means. Stay inside, please. He was already moving toward the outer door. He did not stay inside. I want to be clear that I did not do this out of recklessness or sentiment, or some biological compulsion toward the man who just walked out that door. I did it because the womb, memory was still open, still showing me the Vorkald wolves' approach in real time, and what it was showing me was something that the Ashfen scouts had not yet reported, because they had not yet seen it. The eastern approach was a feint. The real force, 15 wolves moving in a flanking pattern, was coming from the north, through the drainage forest, toward the supply buildings and the civilian quarters, where the children slept and the elder wolves, who could not fight, were gathered. The Vorkald Alpha had split his force and sent the visible threat first as a distraction, and every Ashfen fighter was about to respond to the east while the north went undefended, and he knew this because the womb, memory had read it in the psychic signature of the Vorkald pack bond, their collective intent layered on itself like sediment, showing me the plan in the texture of their shared confidence. He found the Ashfen second, a compact capable wolf named Doran Ashfen, Eason's younger brother, who had remained inside to manage the civilian evacuation, and I told him. He looked at me for exactly 2 seconds, then he said, "How many exactly, and which entry point?" He told him 14 now, one had broken off to circle further. The north drainage gap, the one near the old root cellar, where the fence had been repaired after autumn flooding, and the repair was newer wood and therefore weaker. He moved without asking me to verify or explain. He took 6 wolves and went north at a run. He went to the courtyard. I could see the eastern engagement from the inner courtyard's upper walkway. The Vorkald wolves coming through the tree line in a line. Eason's wolves meeting them with the organized, coordinated response of a pack that trains consistently. And I could feel through the womb, memory, the northern engagement beginning in real time. Surprise registered through the Vorkald pack bond. The north wolves encountering a defended line where they had expected none. The pack cohesion fraying as the plan went wrong. He also felt the moment Caelan registered what was happening. From the east engagement line, I felt him feel the womb, memory's work, not the mechanism of it. He had no way of knowing the mechanism, but the effect, the north flank collapsing in the Vorkald formation. The tide turning faster than the engagement's opening minutes could account for. He felt his wolf's confusion, and then the rapid, analytical reassembly of his alpha instinct processing new information, and arriving at a conclusion he did not have enough data to fully form. Something had changed, and it had not come from him. The battle ended in 20 minutes. The Vorkald wolves, facing organized resistance simultaneously, chose retreat over casualties. The calculation of a force that had lost the element of surprise and is smart enough to know it. They fell back in the northern forest, and the blizzard swallowed them, and the Ashfen wolves let them go. Which was the right call. And the courtyard filled with the controlled of a pass, particular sounds of a pack assessing its situation in the immediate aftermath of a threat has passed. Caelan came through the east gate. He was bleeding from a cut along his left forearm. Not serious, the kind of cut that closes quickly in shifters, and his eyes were still gold, threaded, and his breathing was the elevated, controlled breathing of a man coming down from a fight. He came through the gate and stopped when he saw me on the walkway, and then he looked at Doran, who was standing in the courtyard reporting to a returning Eason with the direct factual efficiency of someone who understands they have just been part of something significant. He watched Caelan listen to what Doran said. He watched him understand. His head came up, and he found me on the walkway, not with the desperate, seeking look of the last 11 days, but with something I had not seen on his face since before my first only The look of a man who has just watched a woman he had comprehensively underestimated reveal the full scope of what she is, and has arrived, all at once, at the devastating understanding of what he gave up. I held his gaze for a moment. Then I stepped off the walkway and walked toward the great hall, where the Ashfen wounded needed attending to, and the children needed to was over. There was work to do. He left the Ashfen the next morning. He came to tell me hymns, which I had not expected. He knocked on my door in the early gray light, his knock, the sharp double tap on, and when I opened it, he was dressed for travel, coat on, pack-shouldered, and the expression on his face was the most legible thing I had seen from him since my first night in the Ashfen library. Resolved. Not hopeful, which I found more bearable than hope at this point. Something quieter and less destructive than hope. A decision. "I'm going home," he said. I waited. "I have something I need to do before I have any right to be standing at your door." He held my gaze, and there was no asking in it, no calculation of what answer he wanted to extract, no readiness to modulate the statement based on my response. Just the statement. "I want you to know I'm doing it. I don't expect you to care whether I do." He turned and walked down the corridor. He closed my door and stood with my back against it for a long time. He heard him leave the Ashfen 3 hours later, through the womb. Memory, his presence receding south like a weather, system pulling back, the frantic, desperate quality by something I could not immediately name. Purpose, maybe. Or grief that has been directed from feeling into action, which is the only useful thing you can with certain kinds of grief. He did not know in those 3 hours what he meant to do. I learned it from Mira, who had it from a traveling packless wolf who arrived at the Ashfen border 2 days after Caelan's departure, carrying the kind of second-hand account that travels through packless networks faster than any official messenger. Big, unmissable. The kind of thing that gets described to people in the same tone as avalanches and eclipses. The Alpha King had called the High Council into full emergency session. All 5 pack lords, all 3 elder councils, every Alpha noble with a seat at the Iron Vale's governance table. He had sent the summons within 6 hours of returning to the castle, and when the council assembled in the great throne room the following morning, Caelan Duskmore had walked in, with his war council at his back and his full formal regalia, on a set of documents that the court secretary Aldrich Pren had been working on without 4 hours sleep for 24 hours. The first document dissolved Maureen Coldwell appointment as queen. Not suspended, not revoked pending investigation, dissolved. Retroactively and completely, citing the fraudulent nature of the process by which it had been arranged, and the specific sections of Iron Vale Pack law that govern the fidelity of the mate bond, which, as it turned out, had not been removed from the law books, but had simply not been enforced by any Alpha King in living memory because no Alpha King had ever been in a position where enforcing them was inconvenient to his own interests. The second document was a full public account. Every detail, the arrangement with Maren, the council's involvement, the plan for the ceremony, his own complicity in allowing it to proceed, read aloud by his own order by Aldrich Pren, in a voice that Pren apparently maintained with remarkable composure, remarkable professional composure, while visibly sweating through his collar. The council heard it in a silence that several counts later described as complete and total, broken only once by one of the elder pack lords, and was stopped to raise a procedural objection, and was stopped by Caelan's single raised hand. The third document named Celine Ashvale as the Alpha King's only bonded mate and rightful queen of the Iron Vale, by pack law, by mate bond, and by his own formal declaration before the full High Council. And then Caelan Duskmore set the documents on the council table, removed his formal crown, the war crown, the heavy iron and silver one he wore to every session of official governance, and placed it beside the documents, and knelt. Not on one knee, which is how alphas bow to each other. On both knees, forehead tipped forward, the posture of complete and unreserved submission, held before every lord and elder and official of the Iron Vale pack for a count of 60 seconds, while Aldrich Pren kept the time, because Caelan had apparently told him to, and Aldrich Pren was a man who kept records even when they made him want to dissolve into the floor. When Caelan rose, he said, "She does not owe me return. She does not owe me forgiveness. The record now exists regardless. That is all." The hall made this at the evening fire, and the hall was quiet around us as she spoke. Several of the Ashfen wolves without to watching me, appearing to watch me. The fire crackled. The wind moved in the pines outside. He sat with my hands around my tea bowl and said nothing for a long time. Then I went to bed. I lay in the dark for a very long time with my hands on my stomach, and I breathed, and I listened to the pup, who was awake and moving, for the first time. I arrived the Iron Vale on a morning that had chosen, apparently, to be as different as possible from the night I had left it. Clear sky, new snow clean and unbroken on the courtyard stones, the kind of winter light that is precise and crystalline, and makes everything look as though it has just been placed, very carefully, and has not yet been touched. Had not sent word. I did not go for the reason people might assume, not because his council declaration had moved me to some decisive softening, not because the pup's movement in the night had felt like a sign, though it might have been either of those things in some secondary way. He went because I had been raised to believe that the work of fairness requires witness. That if someone has done the thing, you must see whether they have done it, or merely said it. He wanted to see. The gate guards admit me without question, with a startled, careful deference. In fact, told me the council declaration had made itself felt throughout the household in a very specific way. He did not go to the East Tower. He went to the throne room. The doors were open, and the throne room was in the process of being demolished. Not destroyed, not torn down with anger, not vandalized, but taken apart with the deliberate organ has been planned, ward attention of a project that has been planned. The marble floor was covered in canvas sheets. The great carved thrones, his and the ceremonial one beside it, that had never held anyone for longer than a ceremony, had been removed from their dais, which was itself in the process of being dismantled. The stone blocks carefully labeled and set to one side. Workers moved through the space with the focused, practical efficiencies and annex doing a job that has clear specifications and adequate resources. Caelan was there, working, not supervising, working, his coat off despite the winter cold coming through the high windows, sleeves rolled, helping two workers lift one of the massive daysack blocks with its labeled position on the canvas. The block was heavy enough that even with three of them it was slow work, and his face had the uncomplicated, absorbed expression of a man who is doing something physical that requires his full attention and his nepliu. Deeply grateful for the requirement. He saw me when he set the block down. He straightened, reached for the cloth hanging from his belt, and pressed it against a scrape on his left hand. The same hand he noticed that had been cut in the Ashfen battle. Look, wound healed now, but the skin still new. He did not come toward me. He did not speak immediately. He stood with the demolished throne room behind him and looked at me from across the canvas-covered marble, as if he was not certain I was not something exhausted kind. I was sunny, nasted mind had produced. "You came," he said at last. "I came to see what you said you were doing." He nodded once. He gestured at the room around him. Not grandly, not with performance. A simple informational gesture. "This is what I said I was doing. I'm pulling it all out. The vase, the marble slab, that section specifically. Where you fell." He knew. He had not told him. He did not know how he knew, could not have explained the mechanism, the womb, memories echoes in the severed bonds phantom channel, the way grief has its own residue in the physical world. But he knew, and he had not built a different structure in the space where I had died. I had died. He had taken the floor apart. He walked into the room. The workers, reading the room with the excellent instincts of people who spend their lives in proximity to power and have learned to be invisible precisely when would be dangerous, when visibility would be dangerous, found reasons to be elsewhere within 90 seconds. He walked to the center of the canvas and stood where the dais had been, and I looked at the stone underneath, exposed now. Bare. The old stone of the castle's original floor, paler than the surrounding marble and older. Look, the kind of stone that has simply been what it is for 400 years without asking anyone's opinion. Caelan crossed the room and stood beside me. Not close, 4 feet. He looked at the same patch of stone. We stood there. After a long time, I said, "What will you put here?" "Whatever you want." I turned to look at him. He met my eyes with the directness of a man who means a thing simply and completely, and does not need it to be heard as more or less than what it is. "I haven't decided yet." He said it quietly. I thought that was a question for 2 people. The cold from the high windows moved across the canvas between us. Somewhere in the walls, the castle settled. One of its low bone, deep groans that old stone buildings make in winter, adjusting to the cold. I looked at the pale old floor. "Leave it for now," I said. "Leave the old stone." He said, "All right." We stood there for a little while longer, not touching, not speaking, while the winter light moved across the bare floor between us, and the castle groaned and settled around us both. We did not fix it in a day. I want to be clear about that, because the stories that get told about things like this, the ones that travel that get passed from wolf to wolf over fires in the way that stories get simplified by the distance they travel. Those stories have a way of compressing the slow, unglamorous, frequently uncomfortable work of 2 people deciding whether to try into something that sounds like a single decision made in a single moment of clarity, It was not that. It was 11 more days of proximity before I slept in the same room as him. It was 3 days after that before I let him sit close enough on the window seat, that our shoulders were almost touching. It was an entire week of breakfasts where we talked about the council's response to the new laws and the logistics of 100 praxils of the PAC administrative restructuring and the 100 practical, necessary distinctly unromantic pieces of work that come with dismantling a governance system, a convenient lie and a convenient tool, replacing it with one built on something more durable, before he reached across the table one morning, not for my hand, but to steady the ink jar that had begun to slide toward the edge on the uneven wood, and his hand passed close enough to mine that I felt the warmth of it, and neither of us moved away. Small things, slow things, things that did not have names in the moment they happened, and only became visible as what they were in retrospect. His scent changed. It was the most reliable indicator I had, more reliable than words which are to be performed. The scent is biological and cannot lie to the womb, memory or to the deep animal instinct of an omega who has loved someone for 4 years and knows every register of them the way you know the voice of a person for whom you've heard daily since childhood. The burnt ash and desperation of the rejection sickness had been replacing Winoceti for weeks, and what was replacing it was not simply the absence of that. It was the return of something. Cedar. Real cedar, not the memory of it. The clean winter underneath. The specific warmth that I had always associated with him on the rare occasions in our bonded life. Not form present. Not performing presence. Not mechanically occupying those beside me, while his mind was elsewhere in the iron veils, operate remainder. There. He was there now. He was there in the way that people are there when they have run out of everything. Present moment, accept the present moment, and have stopped trying to manage what comes next, and have sim the current hour, have simply arrived in the current hour without armor. On the 14th day, we were in the old stone room that had been the library before the renovation objected ad wing expanded into that wing. Sitting on opposite sides of a wide table covered in council documents that needed review, and the fire had burned low, and I had pulled my cloak around me, and he noticed. He rose without of speaking and added wood to the fire, and returned to his side of the table and sat back down. No performance, no checks to see if I had seen him do it, no waiting for acknowledgement. Just, she is cold, here is warmth, this is the table where we are working. He put my cloak down. That night, when the candles had burned to stubs, and the wind was making screens in the old stone passages, he stood at the door of the corridor that led to the room where he had been sleeping, and the smaller room, not the chamber we had shared. And he did not ask. He stood there for a moment in the doorway, with the question living in the exact quality of his stillness. I looked at him. The womb, memory was open, always open now, and what it showed me was not the old complicated layer cake of guilt and hope and self-interest. What it showed me was simpler and harder to argue with. A man standing at a threshold waiting to be told what the future is, genuinely unable to construct it without me. Not because he is weak, but because I am not optional to him in the way that foundational things are not optional. Not a preference, not a luxury, but very thing. Then, and he knows it, and he is not pretending otherwise. He moved over on the bed. He came in quietly. He did not reach for me immediately, which was correct. He lay in the dark on his side of the space between us. And I could feel the discipline it cost him. Enormous. Patient. The discipline of a man who has decided to earn a thing, and is committed to the length of time earning takes. After a long while in the dark, he said, "Your scent is different." "I know," I said. He stopped. Started again. "It's warmer." He did not answer. But I was. My son was born on the first warm morning of early spring. Not dramatic, not in a blizzard, not in crisis, not with the kind of operatic suffering that the stories would probably prefer. He arrived at dawn on a morning when the snow had pulled back from the courtyard for the first time in 4 months. Bare stone was showing, and the bare stone was showing. Still wet, still winter, cold, but showing, the way the world shows itself when it has decided to come back. The old stone floor of the newly remade throne room, which now had no dais and no thrones, and instead a wide council table ringed by chairs of equal height, was visible through the east window from where I labored. I noticed it between contractions, the bare stone, and the light on it. Caelan was there for all of it. I will not elaborate on what all of it encompassed, except to say that what I had needed from him in my previous life. Presence, witness, the simple animal steadiness of a bonded mate who does not look away, he gave me entirely. He was simply there, the way a tree is there, rooted, not going anywhere, providing what sheltered be it, without requiring acknowledgement for providing it. Our son arrived at dawn, announced him with a voice that seemed considerably larger than a person that knew had any reasonable right to possess. Caelan held him first, because I was tired, and because I wanted to see his face when he held him. He wanted to see what kind of man he was in that specific, unrepeatable moment, when the thing he given, when the thing he had lost, and the thing he had been given, and the thing he had spent 4 months earning were all present in the same small bundle, and there was no policy to draft, and no counsel to manage, and no strategy to apply. He was a father. That was all. He was a father who had almost lost this, who knew it, who had not been allowed to forget it. Who stood holding his son in the pale dawn light of a remade throne room with tears, running unchecked down his face, and the expression of a man who has arrived at an understanding of what matters, and intends to spend the rest of his life act then the understanding, the one that came before it. He looked at me over our son's head. What do we name him? He had been thinking about this for months. Pell, I said. He blinked. The gate guard, I said. He let me out, without him. He did not finish the sentence. He understood the sentence. He nodded, slowly. The nod of a man filing something away in a permanent place. Pell Duskmore, he said. The child, appearing to endorse this decision, stopped crying. The new laws passed the High Council the following month. The Omega Rights Charter, Argumo Rights Charter, argued over, revised, argued over again, and finally assembled in its final form by a committee that included 3 Omega elders, 2 Packless Wolf advocates, and Aldrich Pren, who turned out to have strong and extensively footnoted opinions on the subject of legal equity, established for the first time in Iron Veil Pack history that an Omega's mate bond held equal legal weight to an Alpha's. That Omega consent was required in binding in all bonding arrangements, and that the crown could not be passed to any claimant whose bond had been severed, fabricated, or coerced. Small laws, specific laws. The kind that are built from the particular shape of a particular injustice, which means they fitted exactly. Marin Coldwell had left the territory the week Caelan returned from the Ashfen. I did not ask where she went. It was not my concern. On the morning Pell Duskmore turned 6 weeks old, I carried him into the rebuilt East Wing corridor. The one that had been the servants' passage. The route I had taken out of this place in the dark, and I walked its full length and came out the other side. Not as a ghost this time. Not on my way out. Simply as a woman who has walked a passage and come through it, and is standing now on the other side in the warm. Enough air of a castle that is learning. Be different. Or Caelan was at the end of the corridor. He had been renovating this wing for weeks, and was covered in stone dust, and was cut of in stone dust, and carrying up when I came through with the plan, and he looked up when I came through with the baby, and his scent met me first, cedar, full and warm and unhurried, and underneath it the faintest trace of pine, and under that, something that had no name because it was new. The 3 of us together, beginning. He stepped toward him. The cold was something I had walked through. The warmth was something I had chosen. And if you have walked through something cold to arrive somewhere worth arriving, this story is yours. Leave me your name and your country in the comments below. Like this story if it found you at the right time. Scribe, 'cause Celine's world does end here, and neither does yours. And remember, the warmth was always yours. You simply forgot for a while that you were carrying it.